Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
6:07. Good morning. Let's get your day started the right way here on O'Connor and Company. At 6:35, we're going to speak with Elizabeth Edwards Spalding of the Victims of Communism Memorial and Museum. To give a little bit of an education. What the heck has happened with a certain generation that thinks that the slow march toward communism is just fine? 8:05, Dr. Mark Siegel on Trump's announcement yesterday to lower prices on weight loss drugs. And at 8:35, Chuck Thies on all things D.C. politics. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Good morning. Happy Friday as we jam to a little MJ.
Sure. You'll remember during the initial days of the federal law enforcement operations in Washington, D.C., reinforcing the Metropolitan Police Department, working with them to keep the streets safe and to also identify and arrest and deport illegal immigrant criminals who were in Washington, D.C., gang members, et cetera, et cetera. There were a lot of standoffs, not between the people in the crime-ridden neighborhoods who welcomed the police to come and clean up the streets and actually make things safer. No, it was the Northwest D.C. white liberals who decided to come downtown and start getting in the face of law enforcement and protesting.
Yeah.
And one of them, personified now as Sandwich Guy, you remember him. He was wearing his J. Crew pink T-shirt and his...
I thought it was Vineyard Vines, too. Shorts,
I think
maybe?
the shorts were Vineyard Vines.
Okay, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
with his topsiders. He was in the face of a law enforcement officer, and then he threw his sandwich at him and then ran like a little girl. He was arrested, thrown to the ground, and charged with assault against a law enforcement officer. He was charged with assault against a law enforcement officer because he assaulted a law enforcement officer. It was pretty cut and dry, pretty clear. It was determined that Sean Charles Dunn, thank you very much. Boy, it doesn't get more Rhode Island than that, does it? Sean Charles Dunn. Actually, he could be from the Midwest for all I know. Who knows? But he was sporting a bit of a New England Ivy League flair. Sean Charles Dunn, it turns out, was a DOJ employee.
Yes.
A federal employee working for the Justice Department. He faced his charges yesterday in federal court, and he was acquitted.
Oh, goodness.
He was found not guilty by a D.C. jury.
Does that surprise you? It doesn't surprise me, actually. This is Washington, D.C. He's become a mini folklore hero for limp-wristedly throwing a sandwich at one of our brave men who are trying to protect the city. But that's D.C. for you.
Does it surprise me? I guess it doesn't surprise me, but it saddens me, it frustrates me, it angers me, it disgusts me, and it scares me, knowing that this is how justice operates in Washington, D.C., having a reaffirmation that this is how justice is meted out in Washington, D.C. And by the way, he didn't deny the charges. He just said that it was a harmless gesture during an act of protest, and it was protected by the First Amendment. And it makes me that much more terrified for law enforcement. Because what's the next step? Where do you draw the line, and where does a jury draw the line? And by the way, Sean Charles Dunn is just as insufferable as you imagine him to be. Take a listen to a joyful Sean Dunn speaking with reporters after his case was acquitted. Cut 10.
I am so happy that justice prevails in spite of everything happening. And that night, I believe that I was protecting the rights of immigrants. And let us not forget that the Great Seal of the United States says e pluribus unum. That means from many, one. Every life matters, no matter where you came from.
There you go.
Did you see Colin Kaepernick make a cameo behind him?
Well, I saw a dude with a big afro. I didn't know that was Colin Kaepernick.
It kind of looks like Kaepernick, however you want to call it. This guy he really is insufferable. He has made himself the victim, and he does what the left does, which is to lump all immigrants together. We are not all the same. Some of us came here legally and spent a lot of money and time to do it, and others snuck across the border and are, ripping off our system. And he said, "Yes, I was just trying to protect the immigrants." It's just these liberals, man. I tell you.
Yeah. Can I just? Since Democrats try to bring everything back to January 6th, then you're not allowed to have any kind of sane, rational political discourse in this country at any given time without them, 6 degrees of January 6th. There's always just a hop, skip, and a jump from raising January 6th. So let's talk about January 6th for a second. This guy is acquitted for getting into a cop's face and throwing food at him and then running when given a lawful order to stop and step down. And he's acquitted and found not guilty because that's First Amendment. And how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were arrested on January 6th for walking into the state capitol for refusing an order from a law enforcement? Yes, the cop said, don't go in there, and then they went in there, and their lives were destroyed by the Justice Department on January 6th. This guy also ignored a lawful command by a police officer, and he was acquitted by the same jury pool in Washington, D.C. This city is broken. You cannot have law and order and justice if the jury pool in Washington, D.C. decides to convict anyone they don't like politically and acquit anyone that they love politically. And that's what we're seeing play out every single day in this town.
Well, and it's not just this town, Larry. What frightens me, we saw on Tuesday the number of Democrats who didn't care about J. John's tweets. And in fact, for a sizable amount of the Democratic voter base, they are fine with not just violent rhetoric. They're fine with violence as long as it achieves their political ends. And I think that is what is really that's what's really concerning. If there's no endpoint. If you can literally assault a police officer as long as it's not part of as long as the person the assailant is in your camp, then they have free reign to do anything. It's why people deny that Antifa does any type of harm or the BLM riots did any type of damage. There's something really wrong with a lot of people on the left right now in their embrace of violence, not just political rhetoric, but violence.
Yeah, I expect that from them, sadly. That's the long history of leftist politics in the world. But then you have a justice system and a jury that allows it to happen, celebrates it, and excuses it, and allows it to continue. And that's where a society breaks down. That's where we lose all semblance of Western civilization. But, that's sort of the goal of the political left, is to break down our institutions and to reconstruct something in the model of Karl Marx. We'll speak with Chuck Thies about this and other issues facing the District of Columbia coming up at 8:35. It's 6:15 WMAL.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
I'm still annoyed by that case and the sandwich guy. and he's a folk hero now. It's one of the most popular yard decorations now in Washington, D.C. are the skeletons in the form of a guy throwing a sandwich. Meanwhile, also in Washington, D.C., federal prosecutors are investigating the mayor's trip to Qatar. This was, trip to Dubai. It was funded by the nation of Qatar. This was supposedly in preparation for the World Cup. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington investigating whether D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser violated bribery or campaign finance laws back in 2023 in that trip to Dubai. This was for a UN climate conference. Excuse me, this was a different Dubai. I thought while she was there, she was also checking out things for the World Cup. I apologize. Qatar covered $61,000 in expenses for Bowser and 4 staff members. Boy, that's living high on the hog. 5 people, $61,000 for a trip to Qatar. Huh. The Bowser's office claims that it received no notification of the investigation. Trump administration official told Axios that there is no federal investigation. So, not sure where the story's coming from. Critics, federal prosecutors, this is according to people familiar with the inquiry, so they are leaking the story to the New York Times. But again, the Trump administration claims they don't have any knowledge of this, which would, by the way, be appropriate. The Trump administration, the White House, shouldn't know about what the Justice Department is doing necessarily, especially when it comes to a political figure. That's how Biden rolled. The FBI agent who was leading the investigation, by the way, was fired by the Trump administration earlier this week, according to the New York Times, because that same agent took part in a criminal inquiry into the president during the Jack Smith investigations. So, as usual, there are troubles at the Department of Justice in how to properly investigate crimes and prosecute crimes. So we shall say, but on the face of it, it doesn't seem right that the mayor of a U.S. city should get a trip funded by a foreign country, especially a foreign country that has ties to terrorist activity.
I would think. What's interesting is if you go back, the inquiry began in April because of an April report by a local TV station that asked how was this trip funded. When questioned by reporters, the mayor's office initially said it was paid for by the D.C. Chamber of Commerce. Then they changed their story and claimed that the trip was covered by the U.S. Conference of Mayors. Then it was later emerged that the conference group had only paid for a portion of the cost. And so, the question is, it now came out that Qatari officials paid more than $61,000 of that trip. So, it doesn't smell good. And the fact that the mayor's office lied, or, I can't find any other way to say it, was untruthful in being, in explaining who paid for the trip. And if there wasn't on the up and up, then why couldn't they have said it was covered maybe partially by this group and partially by Qatari officials? If they would have been forthcoming if they didn't have something to hide. So maybe there's more to this than I think the mayor's office would like to make it seem.
Well, yeah, I mean, they lied about it the first two times they were questioned. By the way, that was WJLA Nick Minnock who asked the question in the first place.
He's a treasure.
And by the way, it turns out that the truth behind the funding for this trip was discovered by the Foundation for Accountability and Civic Trust. That was the group that included Matt Whitaker, former U.S. attorney and acting attorney general, who now serves in the Trump administration as the ambassador to NATO. It was that nonprofit group led by Matt Whitaker that actually uncovered the truth. There was a March letter from the Qatari officials to the mayor's office proving that Qatar had paid more than $61,000 to bring Bowser and the team to Doha just before the conference. And they didn't come clean about it. They lied about it when asked and when pressed, and it wasn't until that was finally revealed. By the way, didn't Eric Adams get prosecuted by the Biden Justice Department for very similar things? Like, it wasn't even like this. He got upgrades on some air travel to Turkey, if I remember right. Right, and they investigated Eric Adams.
Right,
they
yes.
slimed him. They said that
like
he was
that.
corrupt.
Yeah.
They said that he was a foreign agent and all that stuff. And it wasn't nearly. He didn't get $61,000 worth of free travel and accommodations for.
That's pretty
himself and his
significant. I mean,
staff.
that pretty much covers your trip. You're probably staying in luxury accommodations, maybe flying first class for 5 people. $61,000 goes. I'm pretty sure goes a decent way.
Yeah, and so when asked about the story from the New York Times that there was an investigation into Mayor Bowser's potentially corrupt dealings with a foreign country and all of the lies that prefaced the leak of the investigation, the mayor's office responded. Now, did they say this is absolutely not true? We didn't do that. Did they say there's no truth to this in any way whatsoever? We never took money from a foreign government. Did they say, oh, sure, maybe we took some money from a foreign government, but it's not illegal and the mayor is as innocent as the freshly fallen snow? Did they say any of that? No. Their response was, we haven't been notified about any investigation. And, the trip to Dubai? Oh, that was a business trip. That's it. Though it was a business trip, and D.C. representatives regularly travel to promote Washington as a destination. But that's not the question. The question isn't whether it was a business trip. The question isn't whether D.C. officials travel to promote business in Washington. The question is who paid for it.
Exactly. That matters.
Yeah. And there's no denial there. Now, they went on to say that in some cases, economic development funds are used for the business travel. In other cases, the host or organizer covers the expenses. And then this is my favorite part of their statement. All proper paperwork is on file for this standard donation of travel. There you go.
Then why did they lie when initially asked? I mean, if the paperwork is on file, if this is all on the up and up, then they shouldn't have changed their story multiple times. Come on now.
No, they certainly
we are not Boo-Boo the Fool. We know something's up.
As I mentioned, Chuck Thies will be joining us at 8:35. Let me just be clear. If you're acquitted by a D.C. jury for assaulting a police officer and evading arrest, then you can certainly be acquitted for taking $60,000 from a foreign country with ties to terrorists. So I don't think we're going to see Muriel Bowser behind bars anytime soon. It's 6:23.
All right, coming up, we'll have Elizabeth Edwards Spalding, chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, to weigh in on Mamdani's win in New York City this week. Stay with us. It's O'Connor and Company at 6:30.
WMAL-FM Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. WMAL. News now. Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37. Good morning. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. It's a busy week here that we're trying to wrap up on this Friday in your nation's capital. Coming up at 8:05, Dr. Mark Siegel on the announcement yesterday from the Trump administration that there will be lower prices on weight loss drugs. And then at 8:35, Chuck Thies, D.C. political analyst on, well, all things D.C. politics. It's Larry O'Connor with Patrice Onwuka. Good morning. Happy Friday, Larry. I'm trying to be happy about it, but I'm still a little shook by the results of the New York City mayor's race this week, where Zohran Mamdani, an avowed Democrat socialist, as he calls himself, joined Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders as really the driving force of the Democrat Party now. But what Zohran Mamdani is selling goes well beyond just, we want to be like Norway. No. He's openly talking about controlling the means of production. He's quoting Karl Marx on a regular basis. Karl Marx did not write the Democrat Socialist Manifesto. He wrote the Communist Manifesto. And when communism is put in place, and even the kind of strong-arm socialism that Zohran Mamdani suggests, where the government not only thinks it can solve every major problem, but cares about every minor problem in a society, well, death and destruction follow. We've known that for over 100 years now, and that's why we have the Victims of Communism Memorial and Museum, and that's why Elizabeth Edwards Spalding has made it her life's mission to keep reminding people of the dangers of communism. She joins us now. Always great to talk with you. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be with you, Larry, and hi, Patrice.
Do you think that what happened this Tuesday in New York City is partly a problem of education? It's also noteworthy that Mamdani was really elected by people who have just lived in New York for under 10 years. Many people have just come to the country in the last 10 years.
Correct. I do think it goes to education. More broadly, the end of the Cold War didn't mean the end of communism. And so decades after the collapse of the Soviet Empire, communism and socialism are still with us. That's around the world, where today over 1.5 billion people are forced to live under communism. But then we have these challenges in America that have developed over time in terms of cultural Marxism, socialism, and democratic socialism. And those all are a problem with the youth and with lack of education and sheer ignorance.
Well, to pick up on that last point, the lack of education and ignorance about history and the failures of socialism and communism, part of part of the coalition, though, that lifted Mamdani included a lot of these college-educated young people, young professionals who maybe they feel disenchanted that their African-American women's gender studies degree did not land them a six-figure job. And so they need the free busing. I mean, how do we reach these different parts of that coalition that has, the bus driver and has the immigrant community and has these disenchanted, educated young professionals too?
Right. That's an excellent point. Recent surveys have shown that about a third of Americans under the age of 30 have a favorable view of communism. This is, again, not really knowing what it is. And then anywhere from, it could be up as high as, according to some of these surveys, 62% in that same age bracket feels favorable towards socialism. And then you add that to the kind of voter that you were describing, you have this coalition, as you say. So young and some not so young people like the sound of free everything. I'm using air quotes, free everything that is being promised by Mamdani and his supporters. But they don't know that there is no such thing as a free lunch. They may not even realize that, quote unquote, free everything comes at the cost of freedom and opportunity, all different types, political, economic, cultural. And then the answer is, education, education, education. But that's going to be, that doesn't fix what happened on Tuesday.
We're speaking with Elizabeth Edwards Spalding. She's the chairman of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation here in Washington, as well as the founding director of the Victims of Communism Museum. It is part of our problem with this is that we always argue against socialist politicians and their policies from an economic standpoint. Like, free buses. No, it's not free, and someone's going to pay for it, and it's going to be tax dollars, and it's too expensive. And instead, we don't sort of connect the dots as to, as you just said, ultimately, the free bus means loss of freedoms for the individual. Maybe it's hard for people to sort of visualize that. Help us out.
Yes. So one thing is we should not stoop to Mamdani's level or the level of any socialist, communist, democratic socialist, all of them who ultimately are in league with each other, because, the founders of communism, they regarded socialism as merely a less developed stage on the way to full communism. So there's no difference for them. So we shouldn't stoop to that level. And so Mamdani is engaging in a very limited view of man, stirring up class warfare. And so that means we need to be about and educate what we are for, what we are based on, this experiment in self-government based in rights, freedom, equality. That's our American republic, right? Our representative democracy. And then all of the things that go with that for encouraging and achieving prosperity, for, the making and exchange of goods and services in that experiment. That's where we found free enterprise and an overall market approach to go well with our representative democracy. And the good thing here is that the election goes to the nature of executive power, fortunately in a limited constitutional state, not in an unlimited communist state. So we've got a hard road here, but we've got to educate about that, not just in New York City, but everywhere, so that people understand that.
This is super important. Can you stay with us? We got to talk about traffic for a second, because that's what we do. It's DC. All right, Elizabeth Edwards Spalding is going to stay with us. It is important. She's in charge of the Victims of Communism Museum and the Memorial Foundation, and we're going to talk about how we need to change the way we talk about this stuff, so that the Mamdanis, although by the way, and the Abigail Spanberger used the same rhetoric. Yes. She was just dressed a little differently in her Talbot's pantsuits, but it's the same thing, and it needs to be fought. Otherwise, we're down that road. So we'll stay with that in a moment.
This afternoon on the Derek Hunter Show, the Democrats are digging their heels in deeper about the government shutdown after the elections on Tuesday. It's insane. I'll tell you why at 3 o'clock on WMAL.
We continue our conversation with Elizabeth Edwards Spalding. She's the chair of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and the founding director of the Victims of Communism Museum. We heard affordability. It's about affordability. It's too expensive to live in New York. Affordability. That was picked up by Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. It was picked up by Abigail Spanberger in Virginia. Not a lot of specifics other than, we raise taxes on rich people and then we'll be able to provide things for free and that will help you with your affordability. But historically, I don't think that's how it works out, Elizabeth. And I wonder if you can give us historical perspective. Is that how Lenin stirred the masses in the Soviet or in Russia? Is that how Mao got things going? And Castro, hey, things are too expensive. We need affordability. And the next thing you know, there's blood in the streets.
That's right. That's right. Well, Lenin, of course, is famous for having promised peace, land, and bread to get out of World War I. And we see what happens there. They got starvation and famine. They got war perpetually, and then of course they didn't get their land. And that brings me to maybe gulag humor. Maybe we need a touch of levity here. I was thinking about how there's always been a rat problem in New York City, and sometimes it's been as much as a third of the New York population in terms of humans has been rats. And there's this classic joke from the Soviet era about how to deal with mice in the Kremlin. And the punchline is put up a sign saying collective farm. Then half the mice will starve and the rest will run away. And imagine that you're overworked, cold and freezing in the gulag. But it goes to this point about how you're not going to benefit in any way from communism, and that the promises up front are never delivered on because the ideology is false and destructive from the get-go.
I think that's so interesting, the destructiveness of the outcomes and, frankly, the intention. I am struck, though, by how Mamdani used Dr. Martin Luther King quotes pretty regularly and kind of frames his delivery of democratic socialism as, taking a little bit of the religious spirit of generosity or of making sure all of God's children are taken care of, and we're doing it in a democratic way, which that's absolutely not true. And I'm pretty sure socialists and communists don't support religion unless it's just a tool that they can bring their agenda through. We've seen how the communists use the black pastors in the civil rights movement to move forward with their agenda. So is that what we're seeing here? This tinge of religion, use of Dr. Martin Luther King to kind of inspire people on a racial, religious way, but really it's just to hide the actual intention?
Yes, part of it is to go ahead and try to attract people to something new. People want something new, they want something better, and to go for people who are in some ways not happy. I mean, a lot of people aren't happy with the way things are now. So Mamdani and others, they use whatever they can use. And Martin Luther King Jr. himself, he talked about how there are some positive things that sound good on the surface about communism. He gave a famous sermon several times. And we have that in one of our VOC curricula books. In fact, I commend it to you. But he in the end, he said it's the zeal of communism, it's the zeal of this horrible ism that is worth admiring, not the substance of it. And I think that's part of what these people are tapping into, who are trying to co-opt both religion and also those who stand for God. And we know communism is not just against private property, not just against the individual, not just against family and country, but it's also very much against religion.
Yeah, and, Mamdani often quotes Martin Luther King by saying, well, he once said we need a better way to distribute wealth in this country, but he never adds communism wasn't the way Martin Luther King, that wasn't the solution he came up with. So just by quoting Martin Luther King, recognizing there might be a problem doesn't mean that Martin Luther King endorsed Zoran's solutions. Real fast, it's important that everybody knows that this is the Victims of Communist Museum, the Victims of Communist Memorial Foundation, because this ideology created tens of millions, uncounted millions of victims who aren't here to have a voice anymore.
Yes, it's more than 100 million victims in terms of just deaths that have been killed by communism and are still being killed, because there are still over 1.5 billion people around the world forced to live under communism. And so that means people are still dying each day. But based on what we've been talking about here and what people should guard against, that's horrible. That's enough. But there are also all of these life costs. That's over 2 billion people in the past, more than 1.5 billion people today living under communism who didn't live lives that they would have lived otherwise. And not all of them would have been under a great form of government like us. But a lot of them would have been under something better than what they got. And we have to remember it's life and death tolls. And we don't want that here.
That's why we have the Victims of Communist Memorial Fund, Communism Memorial Fund, and you should check it out and begin that education process once again. Sadly,
come to our museum today on your lunch hour.
There you go. Or if you're furloughed, great, spend all day there. Elizabeth
Very
Edwards
good.
Spalding, thank you
so
very
much,
much.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Good being with you.
Hey, coming up, it's our 7 o'clock hour. We'll give you an update on the shutdown. And we've also got some critter news. And Sydney Sweeney refuses to bow to the mob. She just sat there stone-faced. She's never been hotter. That coming up next.